Well, if you find the minimum, what about the rest of the algorithm?
Well, if it has to be unique, then you have the minimum for response.
But what if it's 1, 7, 4, 3, 2, 8?
Sort first.
Sorting?
Yeah, sort it first and then you go through it.
You could sort it, but I don't have to sort it because I have a while loop there. Sorting and using the for loop will essentially, it's almost the same thing. This just goes through and increments by 1 for each element of the array. So it only passes through once, as opposed to sorting passes through once and then for loop passes through once again. And you still have to increment regardless. So sorting in this case is also matter. If it was unordered, then you would have to sort it. Yeah, but because this is always started at 1,
It's like,
Oh, yeah. What if it was 1, 7?
this one you can make whatever flavors you
Yeah,
want,
5.
with like coconut base or
You
organic.
pick one.
well, so the constraints were super specific. So they were essentially always like the next number was never like it wasn't like 1, 2, 9. Whatever. It wasn't like 9, 2, 1. It was always 1, 2, 2, and a couple of ones here.
So it could either be the number, like check it out right now, one higher or less, right?
From the test cases that I saw, most of them. There were like 30 test cases, so I don't know for sure what other test cases they have.
You can try inserting in a hash table too, because that only takes the unique ones. Keep inserting until it inserts. This means it already exists. So, and you can do the sum at the same time too.
That's true.
So that will take the n squared thing away.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. And I will tell you 90% of the time, the solution is always hash table. I have done those practices.
Yeah.
And
I'm using dictionaries a lot.
yeah, dictionary hash table, that sense. And that's what most of the people are looking for. Yeah.
Well, because the lookup is what, like, it's 1, right? So it's
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what.
Just use a hash table for everything.
I'm not joking. I've come to that conclusion. So when I went to the interview, what I used to do is I used to do the worst case one, like n squared.
Oh, yeah.
But I would talk about it, and then finally when I wrote it, I did the hash table.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, okay.
Well, this I was like, I had like 10 minutes to finish it.
Oh yeah, you did the hacker rank.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't run.
Oh, then you don't even have to talk about it.
My grade 7 too. Yeah, so when I get home, I can do that.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We'll kick off today's class. So let me go through the agenda for today's class, and then we'll see if there are any questions, or we'll start the class. All right. So today, initially, there's a change in order from the class schedule. So I have kind of changed the order of the agenda. So I'm going to do some revision, and this is your chance to ask any questions. And I'll come to this, what it means. So we'll be doing some revision, and then there's a checkpoint at the end of the class. But I'm going to give you guys checkpoint at the beginning of the class, and I'll tell you the reason. We'll do some revision, then there's a checkpoint for React. So you guys will complete that checkpoint. I'll just let you know about the homework that's due. And then the last part, which is majority of this class, is the project work. Okay, so I'll go through some slides, give you what the final project is, how it's going to be, and all that stuff. And then there's expectation at the end of the class, you guys form the groups and answer a few questions. So the good part of putting this at the end is you form your group, you already have all your concept, or I'll give you what questions need to be answered. You guys answer those questions, and then it's done. I mean, if you do it early, you can leave early. But until 9:30, if you guys want to work on your homework after you're done with your project thing, let's suppose you have submitted it, then you have option. You can leave. That's also okay with me. But if you want to sit in the class and do your homework or complete the homework that's due today, or look at the homework that's upcoming, that's also fine. We'll be here. If you need any help with those, we will be here to help you out. Okay. But the only request is please stay in this room so that I know who's here, who's not. If nobody is in the classroom, my assumption is nobody is on the campus, so we'll just leave. Okay. All right. Any questions? Just on the agenda, everybody got it? What I'm trying to say? Yes. All right. So just for Fernando. All right. So we are going to start with a little bit of revision. I'll go through what it means. The next part is a checkpoint. Usually it's at the end of the class, but I'm going to give it to you right whenever I'm done with the first one. And the checkpoint is related to React. All right. You guys will take the checkpoint, and then I'll tell you about the homework. And the last part is a project work. Okay, so the project where you will form your groups, come up with an idea. I have like a couple of 4 questions. You guys will create a Word document, answer those, and then submit that to me. Okay, now if you get done early, you can leave. But you have an option, you can sit here, work on your homework. If you need any help with the homework, you can be here. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so do you guys have any questions related to React? Any particular thing you guys want me to cover, or databases, especially Mongo? Okay, yes.
Okay, so I know I got lost like first day, to tell you the truth, but props, is that a just regular database that's within React that is like start from the get-go, or is that something that we need to make and initialize every single time?
Okay, so question is about props. Is props a database? That was what you were saying. Okay, we'll cover that. Yes. Will, you had a question?
Oh yeah, I was curious about passing a method from one file to another, like on a button. If you have on click in a component, and then like it's also in the app.js.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how those things are connected.
Okay.
We go over methods. That'd be great.
Awesome. Andreas, you had a question too?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about build. Whenever we've been running our full stack apps that we did on Tuesday,
Okay. The build folder.
it makes a build folder.
What makes a build folder?
I know that it does it,
Okay.
but whenever I get errors, I can't find it. So I'm wondering.
Sorry. So you are talking about there are any errors that kind of build, or like the build folder that it creates, it has all the stuff in it?
Yeah, like why?
No, I still didn't get the question. Which two are you talking about?
The build folder that's created.
The folder that is created?
Yeah.
But you said there are some errors. What about the error?
Like if I can't type in yarn start properly, it'll give me an error saying that we can't find this folder build.
Okay.
Right? So that's what I was talking about, that build folder. Like, why is it necessary?
Oh, okay. So what is the purpose of the build folder? Okay. All right. Anything else? What else do we have? Okay. Well, these are still more questions than I expected. I thought nobody's going to say anything, so I prepared my whole own revision. I'm going to force you guys this revision. So, tough luck. I'm going to do the same thing anyway. So, and but the good part is that revision will answer all these 3 questions. Okay. But what my plan is, since your project is coming up, I'm not sure what databases you guys are going to pick, but you guys have already kind of worked on MySQL, so I'm not going to talk more about that, but I'm going to talk a little bit. I'll do some Mongo, and then we'll jump into React, and we'll see how everybody's feeling. Okay? All right. So for those of you who are planning to use Mongo, I'll start from give you a high-level overview, and it's kind of helpful too. If you're going into interviews and people are asking those questions, just about high level about MongoDB. So kind of this will help you. So if you want to take notes, so that you at least have the understanding and what the concepts and what everything means in Mongo. Okay. So the first thing is related to database is MongoDB. Okay. Let me see what it is. Okay, so what is MongoDB? MongoDB is a document. Is a document database, right? So what it means is there are two kind of databases. It's also a NoSQL database. Okay, document database versus relational. Okay, and NoSQL versus SQL. Okay, MongoDB is these two. These two are properties for a SQL database such as MySQL that we saw. Okay, what it means is that all the data that is stored in MongoDB is stored as a document. All right, for now that's the definition. All right, everything is stored as a document. Relational means there's no tables, there's no columns, there's no rows. All right, so your MongoDB does not contain tables, rows, or columns, versus your SQL database that contains all three. Okay, that also ties into NoSQL. Your SQL databases such as MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, all of these use SQL, which means they have tables, columns, rows. All right, versus MongoDB or any other document database. Right, there's one more called CouchDB that's also very popular. So that is also a document database. It does not have relationships such as table, column, rows. That's the difference, first of all. Okay. The data in the SQL databases is stored as rows, columns. Okay. In your MongoDB, the data is stored as a JSON format. Okay. There's a new format that is stored called binary JSON, but to you, it looks like a JSON. So to you, it doesn't matter, but behind the scenes, how MongoDB is storing and the benefit, the quick response, and the smaller storage, all that comes from the format that MongoDB uses. It's called binary JSON. But again, when you look at it, it will still look as a JSON format. So for you, for us, it's safe to say that MongoDB is storing the data as a JSON format. All right. And what is JSON format? It's just JavaScript objects. All right. That is what JSON is, and it literally means JavaScript object. Okay. JavaScript object notations. All right. So MongoDB stores data in a JSON format. But your SQL databases do not store anything related to that. They store in table, columns, columns and rows. All right. Now, when it comes to MongoDB or document databases, there's a difference in terminologies. So that is also very important to remember what they are called. There's no more table, rows, columns. These are all part of SQL. When it comes to a document database or MongoDB, we use the word collection, which kind of roughly translates to table. Okay. Again, it has nothing to do with it, but it's for the ease for people to understand, for us to kind of make the connection. That's what we are saying, that collection translates to a table in your SQL databases. Okay? Your rows translates to document. So when you're talking about MongoDB or any document database, you don't talk saying, hey, how many rows does this table has, right? You say how many documents does this collection has. Okay, and document is basically a JSON, a JavaScript object, right? We saw in our robot 3D and all that stuff, we saw how it is storing. So that's what document is. Now, when it comes to columns, there's no Of course, there's no columns in it, but kind of roughly translates to fields. All right. And what are fields? Remember, JavaScript object starts with a curly bracket. Then you have some fields or attributes, and they have values, right? These attributes and value. This thing is also called field, right? Field or attributes, you can say, but when it comes to MongoDB or any document database, we are calling it fields. All right. So anything that is part of your JSON, that's what is called a field. So this is this thing, this will be my field, and my field will have a value. Okay, and then I can have multiple fields. Right? They kind of roughly translates to columns, because what is column? Column is the heading, right? You have a table and there's the heading, right? And this kind of roughly translates to what a field is. So these are kind of columns. Again, that just to make the comparison, but don't, when it comes to when you're dealing with these kind of database, don't use the word columns or rows or anything, okay? So you will say that your collection has a document and it has 5 fields, let's suppose. Okay, any questions so far? So this is what we looked at when it comes to Mongo. This is like the high level definition from the concept wise, all right? And then when we come into coding part, right? How do we install Mongo, all right? And then there's a command called MongoD or Mongo. Right, MongoD. All right. So what is MongoD? It's Mongo daemon. Okay. And daemon in programming is basically a process that runs. All right. Kind of roughly translates to a web service. Services in your Windows machine. Right. When you right click, go into Windows machine, you see processes running. You see a service running. When we were doing MySQL, we were making sure that some of the services are running. When you look at Windows, it's the same thing over here. So it's kind of like the service that runs, okay? And that's how Mongo database runs, right? Since there's no UI, it's all like kind of terminal based. So that's why you have to actually go to a terminal and type in MongoD to make it run. But when it comes to, we saw MySQL, we saw MySQL Workbench. It's more developed. They kind of do this thing for us on the background. All right. If you go into your MacBook, we saw in the settings, and we had to make sure that MySQL database is initialized, it was running, and all that stuff. It's the same thing over here. Okay. So MongoD is Mongo daemon, and it has to run in the background. Otherwise, you cannot access any of your Mongo databases that are running locally. Okay. When you deploy it, your hosting service that kind of takes care of this thing. Okay, that's how they are able to access the database, right? So MongoD, you start the daemon and then you kind of forget about it, and then you type in a new terminal called Mongo. All right, and what Mongo is, Mongo brings up the terminal where you can write the queries, you can get the data and all that stuff. Okay, so that's the difference. MongoD is a daemon process that kind of starts the service, so you can use Mongo database. And then Mongo brings up the interface, brings up the terminal where you can write your queries, which includes creating the databases, deleting, well, not databases, creating your collections, creating your documents, creating your fields, and all that stuff. Okay? All right. Any questions so far? Kind of getting hang of it? Good? Okay. And then we looked at something called, let's start over here, Robo3D. Okay, and this is the UI developed by somebody else, not part of the team that created Mongo, but it's basically the UI for Mongo. There are a few more, you can look those up, but this is one of the more famous ones. A lot of people use it. That's why I introduced Robo3D, right? So using this, instead of writing the same queries in your terminal over here, you can right click and they have options. You can create your collections, you can create your documents, and your documents will have fields. Okay? So Robo 3D is the UI for that. All right? Now, just as we did MySQL, we use MySQL Workbench, right? Kind of translates to the same thing. So this is the MySQL Workbench of Mongo. Okay? The last part in MySQL, when we were using Node.js, we used something called Sequelize, all right? The Sequelize was an ORM. You guys remember? Object Relational Mapping. Kind of lets you create a mapping, create objects, create your kind of roughly map to the tables that are existing in MySQL. The same thing exists in Mongo, and the package is called Mongoose, right? Versus Sequelize. Okay, same thing. You will see that there are a lot of similarities between these. Everything kind of roughly translates. So Mongoose is the one that you can use to create your basically ORM. You can create your mapping for your collections that are in your Mongo database. Your documents, create those objects, kind of maps them to it. That's what Mongoose lets you do it. Okay. The another good part of Mongoose is that it lets you define relationships between collections. Okay, just as Sequelize, remember we were able to create joins without actually writing the join query. This is the same thing with Mongoose. It lets you create the relationships. And then for that, in Mongo database terms, in Mongo terms, it's called populate, right? Why is it called populate versus creating relationships or joins? It's the same thing as joins. The reason it is called populate is because when you combine two collections in Mongo, one collection goes inside another collection. Okay, that's how joins or kind of relationship work in Mongo. Okay, you will have an object, and then you will have an object within it. So these two could be separate collections. The mechanism to join them would be that one object kind of populates the another object. So that's why it's called populate, because you have a object and somehow it goes in and finds a place where it will fit, where it will make more logical sense, and that's how the relationship work in Mongo. Okay, one more time. So the relationship in Mongo are called populate because the reason is the end result of that relationship is that you will have a JSON, and then you will have another JSON within it. And what will happen is this will be a collection 1, and this would be part of collection 2. Okay, but when you're using Mongoose, you can combine those two collections, and what will happen is one collection will go inside and reside as basically a field. Okay, a field in another collection. So it's kind of populating one collection by another one. That's why it's called populate. It's not called a join, right? It's joining, but basically what is happening is something is going and inserting itself in a different collection. So that's kind of the reason that they call it populate versus calling it join or anything. Okay. Again, when it comes to MongoDB, the relationships are that your two collections come together and one collection is going to reside inside another collection. That's how it works, and that's how you can query them. Okay? Any questions on this? Or any questions on Mongo or anything else? Good? So how many people are kind of thinking of using MongoDB in their final project? Okay. No? Okay. The rest of you guys are using MySQL or SQL. Okay. No, both are fine. I mean, both of them are fine, and again, at this point, the use cases for both of those exist. There's no this would be better in this case, this would be better in this case, because it's not like a huge project or anything. At this point, it's more like a learning factor. Like, you have learned something new. I just want to, use it to make sure I understand. That's the only point at this point. Okay. Otherwise, both of these will work. All right. Any questions on this? So that's the topic for database that I had. Okay. I'm going to remove this. Anybody wants to take notes? Everybody good? Because I ran out of space, so I'm not tall enough to write from the top. Are we good?
Good stuff, let's do this.
No joke. I have actually asked for it, and it never came. I did at the beginning of the class. It never came. So.
I mean, it is Christmas next week.
I was step better.
Well, look, the winner's up.
We'll take the monitors with me.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Didn't see it in the picture.
Let's take a look at React now. All right, let me see if I had anything else. Okay. All right, so before we go into React, you guys looked at ES6. All right, if you guys kind of have an idea, ES6 is a new version of JavaScript. There's a lot of, they kind of did some additions to JavaScript. So the reason we learned ES6 is because a lot of those features, well, I won't say a lot, some of the features kind of React uses those, okay? Now you guys saw a lot more features, but if there are 3 features that you can understand, those are the most used in React, okay? So you can, if you don't want to go through the whole list, you can make sure that you guys are extremely familiar with these 3 ones. The first one is the let and const, okay? Let and const was introduced instead of the variable, okay? Kind of helps you with the scoping part. We had issues with creating vars. They kind of exist out of your scope when you're creating your for loops, if statements. So all those things, they came up with a keyword let, and you will see let being used everywhere in React. Okay. Again, if you are from now on, we'll be using let from beginning, from kind of before. Make sure that you guys are using these 2 keywords instead of variable. Okay, that's the first part of ES6 that you guys absolutely need to know. All right. Yes.
Is there ever an instance where you would want to use var instead?
No. The instance would be if you want to create a global variable, still use var, or if it is like a value, a constant that you are going to keep reusing it, use the const. Okay. And if you want that variable to be accessible outside your JavaScript file into another one, there's export, so you can export that out and use that. There are much better ways. Okay. The second was the keyword class. You guys have seen in React how much class the keyword class is used. Okay. So make sure you guys know this keyword. You will be using this a lot. Right. Basically, behind the scenes is still a JavaScript function. But we'll look at, when I do the revision, we'll see how React kind of differentiates between your class versus your function, kind of component function. Okay, this is the second one. The third, arrow functions. Okay. This is probably the most difficult of all 3. Kind of initially it's kind of hard to grasp, but React uses a lot of arrow functions, and please get in the habit of using arrow functions instead of writing our regular syntax of functions. This thing. Okay. Now, as the name says arrow functions, it literally uses an arrow. These two symbols. Okay. All right. On the left side of your arrow are going to be your parameters. On the right side is going to be the logic that runs inside your function. This translates to this thing. Your params and your logic. That's what these arrow functions are. Okay? Okay. Now there's a few things in arrow functions is if you only have one parameter in your code or in your function, you're passing just one. You don't have to even specify the curly brackets or the parentheses. You can just write it like this. Okay? Kind of short form. But if you have more than one, then you will use parentheses and keep mentioning those parameters. Okay? The next part is these curly brackets. Let's suppose I'll go back to empty. If you have only one line in your function, you don't even have to write curly brackets. You can write, let's suppose I'm trying to multiply these two numbers, x and x, and I'm passing an x over here. Okay? I don't even need these parentheses. I can do this. Okay? One line of code, what it means is that multiply these two and return. This roughly translates to function x return x into x. Okay? But this only works if you have only one line of code and your return statement is kind of automatically added. You don't have to write it, you don't have to do anything. But this basically means that multiply this and do a return, and it will return you that value. Okay? This only works if you have one line of code. If you have multiple lines, let's suppose I have two parameters equal x, y, let's suppose I'm creating a variable z. Okay. Okay. So I have now multiple lines in my function, on my arrow function. Alright? More than one lines, then you have to put it inside the curly brackets and you have to write the return statement. Okay? If you are using curly brackets, you have to write the return statement because this thing only works for like one line, one parameter. Alright? Okay? Any questions on this? So this you will see used in React a lot. You guys have already seen the code, right? You will see that everywhere this is being used. And I would strongly recommend that you guys also get in the habit of using arrow functions when it comes to React. Because when you write your functions in this way, in your class components, React, well, there's a binding issue with React if you write this in this syntax. I won't go through it, but look at the documentation. But if you're using this one, you guys saw you didn't see any bind keyword or anything in your code. The thing with that is if you write in this function, React kind of translates and creates a binding or whatever it does. All right. But this function is followed all over React. Okay. So these are there are like 10, 15 features in ES6, but you don't have to go through the list. If you absolutely need, these are the 3 things that you absolutely need to know to work in React, to understand React, how the code is working. Okay. These 3 are good. The 4th, I will just add the import keyword on the top. You guys see you use import. that's very same as the require keyword. All right, we did, let's suppose we were using inquirer node package, and we said inquire var inquirer or let inquirer is equal to require, and then we said that, right? So that kind of same translates over here to import, like import inquirer from and the inquirer package. Okay. So these are the 4 things that you will see in React a lot. Right? I'm going to go ahead and remove this and see if you guys have any other questions on this. Okay, any other questions on these 4 things? Good. Okay, so the next is React. We're going to React. All right, so the first thing I'm going to mention is yarn versus npm. There's been a lot of confusion. I'm going to talk about it and then clarify this. All right, guys, so yarn and npm are, from the functionality perspective, they both do the same thing. They both are package managers. Yarn was developed by Facebook, and they kind of push it with React. That's the only reason. Yarn at that point when it came out has its advantages because React complained that it's not efficient, kind of makes their code run slow and all that stuff. But if you're using the latest version of npm 5+, everybody should be on 6 point something right now. NPM have come back, they have improved a lot. So whatever the complaints usually that were with that's why Yarn came out, they have kind of already been resolved by npm. Okay, again, they both are package managers. You can stick with npm and do everything with npm also in React, or you can use Yarn, but pick one. All right, this will make trouble when you're deploying to Heroku and you have both your npm part and your Yarn part. It gets all confused. All right, so both are same. There's no you saw me in every exercise. If you see your solutions, you will see them mentioning Yarn. But all I did in the class, I showed you guys, I don't even have Yarn installed, and every one of those things can work with npm also.
What happens in Heroku when you try and, like, you have to literally go to your node modules folder or like,
No. So you will see that it creates a yarn.log file or something.
Yeah.
So that if you're using Yarn, then that file is fine. If you're using npm,
and you go to launch on Heroku with that Yarn file.
yeah, then it gets all confused and it will throw you some errors or something it will recognize. Okay, I haven't tried it, but that's what I've read. So Heroku says, give me one thing, either choose npm or Yarn. Okay, again, Yarn is from Facebook, and I think Google was also involved, so they came up with their own package manager because they saw some shortcomings with npm. But npm latest version, they kind of have resolved most of that stuff. Okay, not to scare you guys, something I read about Yarn is Facebook takes the installation data and they're kind of collecting that information also if you're using Yarn. That's what I read. You guys can find
That's
it.
probably bullshit. You're just trying to get us.
No.
You only push it.
Do your own research, and if you guys trust Facebook, I mean, who doesn't trust Facebook, right? I mean, come on. How would they do that?
All around. Stupid
Right?
content.
Yeah. So take a look at it. I came across this article, and of course they have denied it, but somebody said that what they do, they collect information like how many packages you're installing or what's going on using Yarn. And they said they were collecting at some point the data to make sure that Yarn runs fine, doesn't blow up, all this stuff. So, all right.
But they're still tracking.
They. Yep.
Moral stories. Don't trust seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what else do I have. All right. So everybody clear on Yarn versus npm? Pick a side and stick to it. All right.
Who's the light side? Who's the dark side?
What was that?
Who's the light side?
Well, unfortunately, when you guys saw the Node NodeMon news also, right? That that somebody from NodeMon got fired, but before they left, they added something in NodeMon that goes and checks your Bitcoin on your computer if you have a wallet and kind of steals everything from there. And they did a fix, but that's the world we live in. So pick one and then stick to it, and everything should be okay. All right. So that was Yarn versus NPM. All right. Now the second part is, what is React? React is a JavaScript library that is mostly, well, not mostly, almost every time is used for building your UIs. It is not a framework. Framework goes a lot more beyond. Okay. Library is something that sticks to one part, usually kind of wrapper over something. Okay, remember we saw jQuery. jQuery is a library. I showed you the code for jQuery also. The behind the scenes, it's kind of converting into JavaScript. That's what React does too. The code is there on GitHub for React. Everything is there. You guys can take a look. If you guys are interested, you have any suggestions, they're open to it. They will make fixes if there are any fixes. All of this is open source, okay? So React is a JavaScript library. And from the MVC model view controller, React concentrates on the view part, all right? It's not like an MVC total package. They only are worried about creating good UIs, faster UIs, efficient UIs that run on your browser, okay? That's what React is all about. Okay. Another thing you guys must have heard, React is component based. That's more like a design pattern. Again, as I said in my previous lecture, that these libraries come and go. React probably is going to be the jQuery of our time. And what I mean by this, if you go 10, 15 years back, you look at the old company website, you will see littered with jQuery, right? I've never seen a site which didn't have jQuery. jQuery is always there, okay? Now what I see the transition in a lot of companies, they are just like, blindly going into React, right? Fit the use case, doesn't fit the use case, it doesn't matter. You have to do it in React. So at a point, you will see a lot of React code everywhere. React might fade away just like jQuery, I don't know, after 10 years or something, but the design patterns that they have introduced are going to be there, okay? Maybe some other library will come which will be more efficient in a component-based environment, and we will start learning that, okay? But the concept is still there, component-based, all right? What I mean by component-based is your UI has to be divided into small components, okay? If you have a header, that's one component. You have a footer, that's one component. You have a article tag, like on your site, navigation bar, that's one component. You have some advertisement on the side or right-hand panel, that's one component. You have table, okay, that's one component. Everything on your web page has to be divided in a component. Okay, that's all React is about. If you don't divide your web page into smaller components, you are defeating the purpose of using React, basically. Okay, React is all about breaking down into smaller components, and then they will come together and work together. Okay, and the good part about that is if you have multiple components and there's an issue, only one of your components basically going down. All right, the rest of your page is still there, kind of survives. All right, but if you have one whole big thing, if something crashes, your whole web page is down. All right. Another part of being component based is that it's maintainability. Okay, it's easy to maintain, easy to debug. You can figure out, oh, this is not working, then it is exactly this component that I need to go and look at, versus scrolling through all the number of files and trying to figure out which HTML or which part is breaking.
So it's typically for large apps and sites.
No, well, they don't say it's for any large or anything. It doesn't matter, even if it's a fault. So every website.
You're saying the component-based structure would be most beneficial with a larger.
Well, it will be beneficial. But what do you mean by small? Small, again, it's a web page. This is the real estate you have available in a web page, right? You will still have an about links over here. Right? You will still have these at least 3 pages. I'm sure you'll have more. You'll still have these. You will have a header. You will have a footer. Even this is the use case for React because you're dividing everything in components. Again, you don't have to use React. You can.
Yeah, for a 3-page website, there's no way I would use React.
Right. You can create a again, going back to first week, you can create a website just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's it. A good working, exactly the same thing that a React website does, you can create in these three technology. It doesn't matter. If you open your browser, when it renders the React website, look at the code, it's all JavaScript. It doesn't matter what you wrote on you wrote a class, you wrote arrow functions, you wrote something. Browser doesn't care, but browser doesn't even recognize these right now. All right.
Like a 3-page, like the MVC format, file structure, it's too many files.
Yeah, if it's a small one, just one, yeah.
I do a public, and I include everything.
Yeah, just do a, for interaction, you can just put in JavaScript and this will work. Yeah. Okay. But the only thing is that when you create a website and then you have more interaction and all that stuff, again, everything can be written in JavaScript, but when you look at the code, there's a lot more code and you need to understand, you need to write a lot more code versus, these things kind of make sense to you, like, oh, they're more organized. Again, JavaScript is not as organized when you look at the vanilla JavaScript, right? It's super ugly, super confusing. These things kind of, hide that ugly face of JavaScript, kind of makes it easy to look at. So that's why these are more popular. That's why jQuery got more popular. Okay. It does have a learning curve, but if you spend that time, React kind of starts making sense, kind of starts to grow on you. Okay. All right. Component based. Two type of components that React has: function components and class components. Okay. And we're kind of coming into these questions now. Okay. So we saw two type of components, function you know what, actually, before I get into this, how do we create a React app? React has also come a long way. Initially, I remember maybe 3 years ago or something, creating a React app was like super, I wouldn't say difficult, but it was kind of complicated. You had to add a lot of stuff, but now they have come up with ease. You can just use their create-react app module and you can create a working React app without anything else. Okay. And we have seen this, right? We create this, we run it, it runs, everything is good. Okay. If you're using npm, they have something called npx. Again, you don't have to install anything. Npx kind of comes built in with npm, the latest version, 5+. So all of you should have npx anyway. So you do npx create React app, and then your name of the app, and this will create it. Okay, the yarn is the yarn create app, and then the name. Okay.
So sorry, can you do npm?
npx
I'm
npx.
asking, can we not do npm?
No, you can't do npm. Yeah. If you look at the documentation, I didn't see that they're mentioning npm at all. They said that there's a npx version, and that's what you need to do. Okay. So that's how you create the React app. And then some of the other concepts, quick one is a register service worker. If you open your index.js, you will see a file. If you look at the folder structure, it's called register service worker. Just briefly, if somebody asks you, that's the latest part that that Facebook has included. And the purpose of that is, of course, not tracking. They're not tracking anything. I'm just kidding. The purpose of that is to load your web pages faster. They cache few things, and that file, the code in that, open it up and see. They're saying that it kind of makes websites load faster on the connection where they are slow. If you're on a slower connection, your website still will load faster, or kind of they optimize, they cache a lot of stuff. That's what they have included. Okay, that's about it. They have some more. They're saying there are future features that are going to come into that file, but for now they have released, I think, with the latest version of React. I think it's like 16 or something. That's what the purpose is. Kind of caches, does all stuff, kind of loads your website faster. Okay, service worker, register service worker JS file. That's what it is. All right. Then we looked into React DOM. Okay, there's a DOM with every web page, and then there's a React DOM. Right, React DOM kind of sits between your React code and your actual DOM. It's kind of virtual DOM that Reacts create, and React says that it is faster to update that, and then behind the scenes it makes some async calls and kind of updates the real one. But that's why you will see faster loading time, because you are updating the React DOM, and React DOM then takes care of the real DOM. So you don't have to worry about the the real DOM. And the real DOM, if you guys remember, we were modifying, manipulating it using jQuery, JavaScript, right? We were writing functions, taking the HTML tags out and manipulating them. That's what manipulating the DOM means. And React behind the scenes is doing the exact same thing, but they have their own structure, a virtual DOM. To us, we interact with this one, so that's just like a little more faster than actually modifying the real one. Okay. Briefly, we saw JSX. JSX is the kind of language of the React, and it kind of looks like HTML, but from the documentation, they say it's more closer to JavaScript versus HTML. But you will see it has tags and all that stuff. So JSX is part of React. It's their language. You can skip JSX also if you don't want to write that code. It's kind of more coding. But using JSX, it's kind of easier. You can create those tags and all that stuff that we saw. And React kind of recognizes that syntax, right? It's JavaScript XML. That's what it's called. Okay, so it's kind of language of the React, and you can program in JSX, and React will recognize it. We saw JSX. We've been using JSX all over. And I also recommend that if you guys are creating a project in React, well, not if, whenever you're creating, use JSX, kind of simpler syntax, easy to learn, and then easy to understand also. Okay? All right. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. So the next part was we looked into components, class components, and function components. All right. So these basically mean that you can write a function, or you can write the same code using a class. That's all it means. You create a function, or you create a class. Both of these are recognized by React, and they will render the same way. Okay, there's some differences how you write them out, but basically you have two options. You can either write a component using class and function, right? At a very high level, we'll see from the design pattern perspective which one do we use, but that's what component is. All right, React is all component based, and then you have two options to write those components using class or a function. Okay. Then we come to props and states. Very important, kind of very confusing also at times. Okay, so props, this keyword comes built in with React. Okay, and what props is immutable. This means that the value inside props cannot be changed. Okay. The second part of props is props. This variable is passed from a parent to a child. It's unidirectional. It always goes in this direction. Now you have a parent and you have a child. If you want to pass some data from your parent to a child, which does not require modification, comes through props. Okay. That is what props is. You cannot change props. Goes from, it's one direction only, parent to child. Okay. Props, if you look at props, the data type roughly is an object. You can assign multiple other fields in props. So that's why basically the data type for props is an object. Okay. when you are passing props, they basically come as a HTML attribute loosely. Again, if you look at the code, it will look like a HTML attribute to you. So if you have a, let's suppose I have a component COMP, and then I have some attributes, ATTR1, some value, and then I have ATTR2 and some value. In React, all of these are props. Okay, all of these objects, they will translate into props, and they will be passed to the child component. Okay, and then you can use them however you want, right? So this is one method. How do you pass data between two pages, between components? Okay. So basically, what it boils down to is that data is passed between parent and child. So you need to come up with your components and design it in such a way that they have a parent-child relationship so that they can pass the data. If it is not, then you have to make that relationship. There are different design patterns. How do you break your component? Maybe you can have like siblings and divide the component or something, but eventually you still have to make it parent-child for this to work. Okay? If you want to pass any data. Again, anything that is passed inside this cannot be modified. Right? On this point, when we look at this, usually when you will see any component that is using or using props, they are written as a function component. Okay? Again, you can write this as a class also. It will work. I have tried it. It works. Everything still fine. But from the design perspective, what the React recommendation is and what the other engineers say, that if it's props, if your component is only going to use props, make it a function component. And the reason behind is function. This is more native to JavaScript. It's more easier to test. You guys looked at briefly at the unit test cases. When you go out there, companies are using unit tests, and you have to test your components. Functions are much easier to write unit tests versus classes. So if you can avoid, don't write a class, write a function. And props is a good use case because it doesn't modify anything. It's not doing anything. You're just reading it and doing something. So function kind of perfectly fits for it. Okay. Again, there's nothing stopping. You can create a class. It will still work. Let me see if there's anything else in props. No. Okay. One of the questions came up was, how do you can pass in a method in props and some other page kind of understands it. Okay. So again, that's where the parent-child relationship comes in. If you understand the parent-child relationship, you are passing something to your child, and you are passing props, and props is a object. Remember, from a JavaScript object, it can have fields, it can also have functions, right? So you can create your props as a function and pass that also. Okay. Again, we saw this in our submit button, handle button, and all that stuff. This basically is saying that, hey, there's a function that resides over here in my child component. Go ahead and fire that method. All right. So that's what. But the basic reason behind it, since it's an object, you can pass in fields. You can pass in methods also. Again, you don't have to do this. One of the reasons is, why would you pass in methods is that you have a parent. You have a parent, and then you have multiple childs. And let's suppose they have a function that is same across all the children. So what would you do? You write a function here, the same function here, same function here, the same function here. All right. Now going back to our dry principle, do not repeat yourself. There is an easier way. You can extract this the same function, if it's the same function, drag this out, put it in your parent, and tell your child, kind of pass them that property, and they will execute the same function. Again, it comes down to how you refactor your code. You can have different function, it will still work, but if there's any change in this function, that kind of reflects on all, you have to go into 6 files and change that function. So when you're building your props, if you have more children and you have a repeatable property, take a look at the design and see how it can be minimized, how it can be extracted out, how it can be made more efficient. Again, I said in the beginning, be a lazy coder. Try to see how lazy you can be in writing code. How less code you can write and it does the work for you. Right? Okay?
That's lazy to you?
That is being lazy.
That's the opposite of lazy to me.
Well, writing.
Well, right. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my thought into it. I'm not typing anything. I'm putting more thought in the architecture, saying how can I make it easier. But when it comes to typing, I'm typing less words, so it's kind of. So I'm fine by sitting and thinking about it versus actually typing the whole thing out and doing it. Okay. So that is what props is. All right. Any questions on the props part? Good. Getting a hang of it a little bit. Okay. So the next one is props is actually easier of the two. State is a little bit more complicated. State is also an object, okay, but state is a very private variable. Think of it as a private variable that cannot exist outside a component. Okay, this is a variable that is private and only its existence is only inside the component. Okay, that's the first part. The state can only exist inside a component. It cannot be accessed from outside. It cannot be sent outside. A state remains inside this, the component that it is created in. First part. Second part, when you have a state, you cannot use a function. You have to make it a class. That's how the syntax is. That's how the coding part is. It's not possible to create a function and have a state in it. So that's why any component that have a state, we call it a class component. Okay. I'm going to cover the easier parts and then get to the complicated one. If you want to set, you can set, update, modify anything to the state. It's mutable. The values can change. But the only way you can change a state is using a method called setState. That is the only way to set a state. Okay, you cannot do state dot var1 is equal to something. This will not work. The only way to do this is inside your setState method. All right. So every time you want to set a state, put it in your setState method. All right. So what's the biggest point in state? So state is something that React uses when there's a change. Every time there's a change on your web page, anything that is changing on your web page goes in your state. Always remember that. Any part that is changing in your web page goes in your state object. React is constantly looking for this change, and it will update your component, and it will re-render your component if there's any change in the state. And that's what we want. We looked at the books example. We saw there was some addition of the books, and your books page kind of rendered again. So that was all part of the state. Anything that is going to change and you want them to be reflected, you use the state. Right? React is constantly looking for this one. They have the mechanism, they look for any changes to it, and then they will re-render that page, that component. Is there anything else? No. Okay, that is what state is used for. Okay, any questions on state? Good. Okay, now we come to the design patterns that we saw. presentation component and container component. Again, that's a design pattern that has been proposed. You guys don't have to follow it, of course. But what the design pattern says is your components can be divided into two parts. One called presentation. Presentation component just deals with how your component looks. Okay? Presentation component deals with how your component looks. And then there's a container component which deals with how your component works. This is the design pattern. Presentation versus container component. Looking part, what does it mean? It's just looking. It's not going to do anything, right? Which of these two are not doing anything? Props. You cannot change anything. This is how, as soon as it comes in, that's what is going to get displayed. So presentation components are usually some deal with props. If they're dealing with props, they are function components. Okay, that's how presentation kind of ties into props and then function. Container component does the work. This means that something is changing. Something is changing. A state. And state are class components. That's how they tie. Okay. By convention, if you are following this design pattern, put a container at the end of your class name or your file name. Presentation component, we don't put anything, and that's how they kind of identify. If there's no container at the end of your file name, it means it's a presentation component. If there is, it means it's a container component and it's using state.
Could you use an example of
Yeah, remember we saw that activity. What was the number of that activity? Okay, let me go and find that activity now. Or does anybody have the activities from the last class? I think I deleted all of them. And just tell me what that activity number is, which has the container part. Let's see, React 20, React router condition, maybe formal review. No, not this one. See. Oh, no. Maybe the Pubster app? Let's see if this has a
Conditional rendering on it.
conditional rendering. Okay. So open up the conditional. I'm going to show you how the folder structure is kind of divided. So if you see the profile container, so profile. If you open up the open up exercise number 4. Okay, and you will see profile container, and that's what the example is. If it's a container, it will have state. The rest of the things are just using props. If you look at the pages also about blog, contact, home, these are not really modifying anything. All right, so that's why it's not using anything. Profile probably has something that gets updated. That's why it has a container inside it. Okay. All right. What's next? Okay. So this was the presentation and container. Then we look. Then we looked at the lifecycle hooks. Okay. What this means is that each component has some methods. When you do a class, each component has some methods that are part of his lifecycle. What it means is when a component starts, renders, does something. Those are called lifecycle events. Right? Some of the events that we saw was constructor, right? If you want to initialize something in a component, and this is only for the class components, right? Use a constructor. The most used is the render method. That's part of the lifecycle. When your component renders, anything that you want to render goes in your render method. That's part of the lifecycle of a component. Okay? Render is mandatory, required, the others are optional. The third one that is most used is did component mount. This lifecycle method is called every time your component shows up on the screen. It's only called once when your page comes up and it has been mounted if. So this is used when you want to show something on your web page. Remember we saw the search bar thing where you put in something and it searches, makes an AJ call and searches. But the first time when your page loads, you want to search something by default and show up on your page, the code goes in your did component mount method. It's component did mount. Okay, so these are the more important, and you'll see these three lifecycle methods a lot. These are functions that are part of a class. Since it's a class component, it means they deal with the state, right? Because these are changing based on your states. All right. There are some more lifecycle methods. Look at the documentation, but there are a couple of more that are more might be used. Are component did update. If there is any update to the component, you can put the code here, and component will update also. Before it gets updated, this is the method that gets called. What I mean by these methods is these are methods that are built into React, and React is always basically hooking. That's why it's called lifecycle hook method, because React kind of hooks into these methods and see if somebody has written those methods in the code, and then it goes ahead and calls the code that is written inside this function. If you don't write it, then whatever the default code is that React has is going to execute that as it is. But if you write these methods, then the code that you write is the one that's going to be get executed. Okay. When you do a constructor, always do super dot constructor. Call the super method. Okay. What was the exact method now? I forgot. Was it super dot what? Just super? Yeah, it's just the super method. So always make sure every time using a constructor, within the constructor body, write the super method. What this means is your component is kind of coming from a parent component. So a parent component has this method, constructor method, and it will get called. Okay, that component is from the React part. You can look at the code, but it's kind of hidden from you. So always make sure if you write a constructor, make sure you put in super. Okay. All right. Then we saw conditional rendering, if-else kind of deal, logical operators. JSX doesn't have if-else. You cannot use if-else. That's why we use ternary operator. Ternary operator, which is the question mark, the colon, and question mark thing. Okay. So before you write your statement, okay, then what you are trying to evaluate, then you put the question mark, and then when the statement is true, this will be executed. Otherwise, if it is false, then this will be executed. All right, the ternary operator. So you have a statement, question mark, if it is true, or if it is false. That's what it is. Okay. That's what we saw. So there's no if-else, that's why you have to use this, or the logical operators, and, or, and all that stuff. Okay. We looked at forms, right? So HTML forms have their own state, but what we do in React is we take that part from the form, and we make sure that React handles all the state and everything. You don't want states to be hanging around two components. So that's why we prevent the default method we call in forms. That's what it kind of takes the state handling part from the forms. So HTML forms, again, by default have their own states. So it takes it from there, gives it to the React component. And with that, another term you will hear is control component. So the component, the React component, is the one that's controlling all the states. So that's why we call it a control component. Okay, it's just not this example. Any other, if you have multiple components and you take the state part out of multiple components and make them only props and give a state to another component, you are basically saying that this component is controlling everything else. So it's called a control component. It's just a concept. Okay. The last thing we saw, and then we saw events, handle change, handle submit, on click methods. All right. Those are basic your methods that kind of get called whenever there's a keystroke, whenever you submit the form, and then there's a click. All right. Make sure you use the arrow functions. All right. If you are not using arrow function, look at something called binding. You'll have to do a binding in your constructor. You have to write some extra code for it. All right. So, but stick to arrow functions and everything should be fine. All right. The last thing we saw was the React router. All right. You guys remember React router? React router is not part of React, but kind of ties in very well with React. So it's kind of like the de facto router library that everybody uses for React, right? It has few parts, starts with the router, then has routes and has the links. So if you have multiple pages, use the React router and kind of link your other pages to it. Okay, again, React router. Look into React router. We started with the router tag, then there's route, and then within the pages there's the link tag. Okay, in the routes you mention which page you want to route to, and all of this code goes in your app.js. Okay, make sure you put your routing in your app.js. Well, except the link part. Link part goes in your components. Everything else goes in your app.js. All right. Let's see. All right, the last part that we saw in the last class was the MERN stack. We built both our client and server applications. Okay. In those applications, we had our client code and a server code separated out. We had two package.jsons. The reason was we have some code that we want the client to run, and when we have some code that the server wants to run. All right. For example, the Axios library. It's a really good library for making AJAX calls on your browser. Okay. So that's why we're using a package.json, because so that it gets installed and your browser can make AJAX calls using Axios to your backend server. Okay. So in like 1 hour and I don't know 30-40 minutes, I have covered 2 weeks of lecture. I see more than 2. Well, the good thing is, did you guys understand? Is there any questions? Kind of gives you an overview.
Why didn't we do this in the first place?
Why did you what?
Why didn't we do this in the first place?
Well, the good thing is you guys kind of make sense now, right? That's the more important part. So again, the course is divided, and a lot of people were saying, hey, why didn't we do this? The course is divided. If you look at it, you will never understand if this something else was introduced before. Handlebars, again, not necessary, but if you didn't know handlebar, you will be like, what is this curly brackets doing inside my JavaScript code or my code? Everything kind of ties in. You guys are kind of getting the sense of it because we have done something similar in the previous class. You might not notice it, but that's why you are kind of understanding this. Okay? All right. Any questions? Yes. Oh yeah, build question. All right. So this build, this will only when you are deploying to something. So what your build folder does is it kind of takes all your code, transpiles it, right? Your browser doesn't understand React, doesn't understand anything. So your build code has the one that has all your JavaScript, which is minified. All right. removes all the spaces, all the variable names. All right. So interesting part is the minification process. If you look at JavaScript, if you have a variable called num, this I think kind of goes and minifies it to v and n. That's it. This kind of minification process kind of takes out, makes it, creates a table or something. Anyway, the more important point is your build will have all your code that is going to be deployed, and when your website hits it, it looks at your build folder and sees all your web pages should be there. Minified, you will see some weird extensions. When you open it up, there will be like weird amount of code, but that's all the process that is going through so that your website can load faster. Can load. Now, why is it inside? Why is it compact? Because your there is only limited bandwidth, right? You don't have unlimited bandwidth. If you have your build with exactly the same folders that you have, imagine how long it's going to take your page to load. So your build kind of takes your whole project, does something, minifies it, makes it compact and small, and puts it into that folder, and this is the folder that gets executed. There's another part called Webpack.
Where is it located? Build for?
It only gets created when you do a npm build or when you run that command. It won't get created in your local if you just
run the npm build.
right when you're deploying to Heroku, and then what you will see. Look up your package.json. You have a scripts tag. You will see they have like commands over there: npm start, npm build, and blah blah blah. I don't exactly remember, but those are the ones that are creating these build folder. Okay. There's something called Webpack. Take a look at that also. That is included as part of the build folder. Webpack is the one that kind of comes together, kind of minifies everything, makes your code, makes your package small as possible and more easily run by your browser. So there's something called Webpack. That's what's been going around, and this is also part of React. Well, it's not by React, but somebody else developed it. It's kind of, again, the de facto part, like the React router. Webpack is the packaging mechanism to make those build files and all that stuff. Okay. I was saying initially you had to set everything up. You had to install Webpack. You had to do a lot of. I have done this. It's crazy the amount of time it took just to make a React application. Today, it's just one line npx create React app, and everything is already in that app. Okay, so they've come a long way from initial one. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's take a few minutes break, and then we will do the checkpoint, which is based on React, get it over with, and then we'll do the project work. Okay, hopefully you guys already have some teams in mind. If not, take advantage of this 10-15 minutes break. And make sure you guys are, again, three or four people.
Checkpoint work now. It's valid for an hour.
Okay. So when you come back from the break, take the checkpoint. We'll spend like 15 more minutes on it, and then we'll go into the project.
Daniel,
Yes.
you have a class on Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are getting into Java this year.
It's not Java. It's something to do with a little more advanced topic, or kind of. I'm not sure what Carson does.
Please take a few hours.
The session was called Driving with Java.
Yeah, they changed it. And the reason why.
Are we not getting into Java then?
No, because the coding, the response we got was more confusing. It doesn't help a lot than doing this.
What was your grade? 46? Well, that means
Daniel, do you know what Saturday is going to entail?
Something to do with React.
Or you do all A,
My
you do B, obviously go with D.
Carson already has his thing prepared to do,
Cool.
but he said it's something to do with React, and then they're kind of.
All four of us would be one hazard.
That's right.
He said it's something to do with React.
Tucker or I think there's somebody Ray.
Yeah.
Cool. See, we tried to squeeze out like a day of React Native in ours.
Oh.
Someone made a comment like, well, all you have to do is just change the tags.
Just change your div to view and you're good.
Demonstrate their skills.
Kind of, but not really.
Actually, I don't know what year it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bunch of,
Curious to see.
it's like GitHub, but.
Brilliant Christmas book, trying to learn
Oh,
a little bit.
yeah, so, like, you'll get a problem with, like, the one I'm working on right now is super cool, but, they'll give you problems like, why are you have, intro tab, so if you go back on top, and then,
Like funny years on it. You just touch the antenna, it's a perfect picture. Second, move your finger, it's just like unseeable. It's so annoying.
like, they'll give you, essentially give you a problem. They'll say, hey, here's the sample concept, here's tutorials, so this one just reverses it. And basically.
I have a TV tuner on the Xbox. Well, it's a USB. That's got a little antenna that you extend out. But legit, it only works like certain times a day. Like from like 3 to 5, it'll get some random channel that only plays Third Doctor. I swear to God, that's the only show that's ever on this channel. But aside from that, like I've tried to hold it, maneuver it, I've tried to add tinfoil. I don't even know why I bought it. So it's not good. It makes my location, like I don't know what it is.
Yeah, they'll be able to.
But yeah, it's that same thing, I'm stuck with it.
Yeah, they'll be able to see
With wind flows, super unreliable.
They'll be able to actually look at, your.
Wow. That's sweet. I hate how spoiled I've become. Well, I think that's why people have kids back.
You are the
I can change the channel with my voice. I can call my groceries with my phone. I have somebody else on my phone.
I saw this one meme. Big and gnarly back in the day. Whenever trains were rolling out, they were ordering all the trains to see how much
It sounds like
the guy
and his name was either Dan or Dave, but his name was the same UTV or something like that. But he was a premium lady. He made like 30 pounds around. And he was like 6 foot 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4. And was one of those ferocious linemen one around the car.
Don't you dare.
What was there?
Yeah. But pretty remarkable. So I actually pulled over.
But I wouldn't put her in the trunk just in case anyone like single backseat. So. I called him in 30 minutes.
You walk through.
Maybe it's still my first city, so then I took it back and I just put it
So ironic. To be that close. It was nice. I was just so amazed at how could be. It's like it's so money saving. What a mental ridiculous woman. Yeah, totally. I know.
Here's my family. Didn't take any range training. Didn't take any range
So there's a door behind the driver. The guy like had such a Yeah. So he knew. Yeah, he was married. He definitely he's not going to do his style. He mentioned it. He just scanned it. Whatever he did, it must have students. Yeah.
I just realized how long this is.
Was it? Has it been a couple hours?
Yeah.
Only on like
Spend the rest of
23.
this.
I'm like, it's gotta be close to over. Yeah, look, it's so far.
What is
This
this?
part 3, part 4 if there's a lie.
It's what?
Part 3, part 4 if there's a lie. It's part 1 and spend the rest on part 2.
Oh yeah. Never get to the prize. How many questions are there?
There's like 48 or something like that.
46? Oh my god. You know they have allotted 10 minutes for this. Chop chop.
It's only like one question every 15 seconds.
Throw a post out like that. Oh, good.
No, that one was what I researched on this one. Yeah.
I didn't check it in class.
Someone wanted This is like the amount of presentations at the time. You good? Sign my NDA and I'll let you work on my app. I make this cool thing, speakers about ordering a so I can get something
In my field, there's money to be made. But if you don't have the knowledge, then go for it. It's when you win. But you know what I'm saying? Like there's money there. And here we'll never. Oh, we have to do it now.
Move on. Up there.
Okay, so I can't be that kind
Sure. You got that osmosis. Yeah, let's go. I'm like a plant. They're all wrong.
I know which one they mean.
But they're all wrong. I just David said that's one forever. Yeah. Good. Good work. I had Rob. Yeah. What he did before. That's something.
Answered enough.
that is if you're then
It's all I use. And then just go to
Rotate
from
or first
Yeah, you like to feel like you're in the matrix.
It's kind of transparent. I switched mine up to this one that's got a little opacity.
Ah,
It's a okay. I've bought my shoes in 2 years. Super slow. Once I buy one pair of shoes, I'm like, I'll buy 3 and then I'm sending half and then watch and something like,
yeah. I need some new belts too. Cool.
like
all of the above. It's hilarious.
Some of these questions are pretty bad.
Yeah. One of them, all the answers are wrong.
All of them are wrong?
Yeah, that's a typo.
Oh, it's a type.
Well, you mean like 46 for the very first answer is all of the above?
Well, it's not the same number actually.
But I think it's like, yeah, there's one.
Yeah, there's no, there's a one where it says using this class shown in it. What is the best way to initialize it? Well, all the initializations misspell the class.
Oh, so all of them are So we'll start back up at 8:15. Get as much as you guys get done, and we'll start on the last part. I want to give you guys time to think about the project and make the teams also. Yeah, there are 46 questions. I don't know. You have
I pretty much got what I expected at least.
Ready to go. Let's do this.
72? That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. That's barely passing.
72? I would take 72.
That's right.
At
least you didn't get 2%.
72 is still.
I'm pretty sure if you got at least one question right, you got more than 2%. Considering there's only 46 questions.
Well, given that amount of time you have to spend on it, you have to come up with quick answers. So, guys, one more minute and then we'll start the project. I'll try to wrap it up in like 15 minutes and then give you guys back 1 hour to think about the project. Then I think that should be it. What's up, Jaden?
So next week's content is going to end up being probably more review focused.
Okay.
I'm working out kind of a skeleton lesson plan with Carson on just some Redux stuff to do Saturday. And I think what we'll probably plan on doing is just having like review days where you can either open it up to the class and have kind of a forum, or if there's things that you specifically want to cover, give you that option to do. So I've been working through with another instructor, kind of building out some stuff with Redux and stretching it out into multiple days. It's just not. It's not viable. We really only there's only really 1 day's worth of stuff at a high level. Otherwise, we're getting really into the nitty gritty of it, and it's getting a little bit too specific to that.
So I think that's probably what it's going to look like.
Okay.
I'm gonna ping basically what we have up into a fork of a repo now,
Okay.
so that you can look at it.
Yeah,
do
just send
whatever
me
you
and
wanna
I
do.
can.
But I think it's gonna end up being a really chill week
Okay.
in that sense,
Okay.
where you'll have some more self-directed stuff. If there's things that they specifically want to review or you want to do. Yeah, I mean I've just got a couple things to contribute as far as that, but anyways.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, just share it with me and I'll build it.
I think it's with Jason being out of town right now and him being very vague about what he actually wanted to have happen. It's kind of like, well, I can write a lot of things, right? We could do a whole, day on closures. That would be fun. I'd like that, but I don't know. I mean, so I'll provide some of that content to look at and think about, and I think it'll be a chill week.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, just reply and then I'll look at it and add some more things from
Yeah, and I think doing the majority of the Redux stuff the first day is probably the best, because then you've got time to go back and go through it, and then maybe get into higher order components and things like that from there. So,
Okay,
anyways,
sounds
good.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right.
I just wanted to update you.
All right. I'm pinging you every third day.
Nothing like 11th hour delivery.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at our projects. So this will be the last project of the course, of course. My expectation is please put in real time, put in real effort into this project. This is the one that you will be make something that you are proud of. Okay, something that you will be showcasing also, right? Remember that this project would be, the presentation at the end would be more open to more people. I'll keep you posted how it is going to work out. But is that how the demo day works? Do you guys? Okay.
But yeah, no presentation.
Okay.
Probably the employers.
Okay. So that I'll keep you posted about what's going on, but expect that. So make sure you guys try to come up with something more real world that has a real value. All right. So that kind of opens up. Take a look at this. But basically, the requirements, I already shared these requirements with you. Again, the grading would be very strict on the requirements. So make sure you guys are fulfilling each one of those. Anthony was asking about Heroku versus any hosting website. It's fine. I'm fine with it. This has to be hosted somewhere, not from localhost. All the answers. So that should be okay. But Heroku is there, free. Just use that. Any questions on the requirements? I mean, this is the third time I'm showing this to you guys. Yes.
I was gonna say, are you sure that the employers wouldn't like to have everything on local?
I can guarantee you that one goes over. Hey, it runs on my machine, right? Yeah, that's imagine the production product you. Well, it runs over here, right?
It runs on this one, so
Yeah.
here, take this.
Yeah. All right. So this time the deliverables are kind of different. The deliverables are divided into 4 phases, and these are all the dates. Again, I'll post it on Slack at the end. But these are the dates that you guys are going to deliver these 4 things. The last one, of course, the 4th one is the presentation. The final one, 10 minutes one, you guys have gone through it. That's the one. But the first one is coming on January 8th. You guys have a lot of time. Take a look at it. And I'll show you the detail what those are. But these are the dates, and these fall on every Tuesday. Okay. So it's going to be every Tuesday starting January 8th. Okay. Yes. Any questions? All right. So let's see what each one has. This is the first one. Okay. So make sure you submit a detailed plan of action of your project. All right. If you take a look at it, it's saying, what are the UX, means the design, the UI components that you guys are going to be using, how they are going to look like. So the perspective of this, just not the coding part. I want to make sure you guys do the project management part also, that you guys are coming with an organized way to complete all those tasks. Okay. kind of way to make sure everybody is accountable for the task. Also, everybody is contributing, everybody is learning, and being a part of the project. Okay. The last number 5, Jira, Trello. Trello is free, or you can just use the GitHub one also. Any one of those is fine. GitHub already has it. We have looked at it. If you guys want to use the GitHub project management board, please go ahead and use that. All right. How the screens or flow. This is just an example. This is what we are looking for. Kind of come up with a high-level overview how you think your screens are going to look like. Of course, this is going to change. The end product is probably not going to look exactly like this, right? Maybe like 60% close. But the thing is that you want to see how your product is going to kind of flow. Okay. Again, this is open. Guys, come up with on your own screens. Take a screenshot and you can submit that. Yes.
Do we actually have multiple routes on this project?
Let's see if that's a requirement, but I think, I would hope that there are. So again, the routes depend on what your project is. If there is one route, do you think it's fine? Is it small or is it? And make sure that what your thing is, right? Again, there's no special like you can have one route or multiple routes. Again, I'm not going to come and say there's only like one route over here. But but what I would prefer is the complexity that you guys are actually using something. All of these components are included in it. And I doubt there's going to be one route. Hopefully, it's kind of very difficult to have this one because there'll be a lot of code then in one component. Okay. All right, so we were on this one, or this is also another example. You don't have to be super fancy. Just create in Microsoft Visual or any other free softwares, create some boxes and show how the application is going to flow. The purpose over here is in the first deliverable, I want to see how your application flows, what are the pages, what are the, how it is going to look like. And these are all, if you see, is like written in English. You don't have to write any coding part or anything and explain, make it short, make it how it's going to look like, and then come up with the diagram. Okay, up to you guys. You can either come up with kind of more fancy one, or you can come up with like a flow chart kind of deal. Okay. Let's see. All right. Any questions? We'll post the deliverables that are due the first one. Actually, there were a few more. Let me find these. Okay. So the first, I already took like a flow chart, like concept. Make sure everything is good. Set up your project, and we'll go ahead and can you Vic or Will or Nick, can you guys Slack out the week 1, week 2, week 3 ones? What are the requirements for each one? Week 2 is more like a working kind of product required. Week 3 should be like a polished, almost complete thing, and then week 4, of course, is the presentation, and they'll Slack out each detail for those. Okay. Now the important part is these are the 4 questions that I want you guys to work on the rest of the class. Okay. Come up with your team. Again, as I suggest we have 4 members. Please be thoughtful. Make sure include everybody. I'm hoping that everybody in the class is part of the group, and I don't have to assign somebody. But again, if I have to, please come to me and let me know before the end of the class. I'll make sure everybody is assigned to a group. So 3 to 4 people. I think there are 20 people, so 4 or 5 groups, it should be okay. But 3 to 4 people, again, 2 is too less, and 5 is, in my opinion, kind of too much for this project. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards 3 to 4 people. Put your name, create a Word document, answer these questions. The team name this time, The theme is going to be Game of Thrones houses. So please pick a Game of Thrones house. Put your team again. First one who does it. That's what their name is. So Game of Thrones houses. If you don't know, Google Game of Thrones houses. I have already put some over there. Let me see if I can make it. Okay, there are more, but these are the what is considered if you have read the books or watched the movie. But these are the great houses. Again, pick one. This is our team. 4 to 5 members, and then answer those questions. So by the end of the class, I want your concept and those 4 question answered. Let me bring them back on the screen. What the app will do? Give me a high level overview. Again, if you are kind of leaning towards, please. So the purpose is I want to make sure everybody, each group, kind of has a good idea what the app is going to do. It is kind of worthy of a final project also, right? Not too less, not too complex. The second part is the technologies you expect. All right, again, this is going to change. Once you get into it, you're like, well, I don't think we can do it, or we need something else, right? Again, this final project is not all, but a most part is about accountability also. I want to make sure everybody in the project is a contributing member. So please come up with a very detailed plan, talk among yourselves, see who is going to do which part, and then the deliverables have been stacked out. Right now I'm interested for deliverable number 1, what each member is going to be doing. Okay? Alright, please include the team lead also, pick one as a spokesperson of that group, and then you can answer all those. Okay? Now, do we have all the groups? Is everybody assigned to a group? Eric, you're nodding. Huh? Can we go ahead and stand up and sit in a group so I can make sure for my no, sit in a group. You already have a group? Sit. So this is one group. So Will, Olga, this 4. Okay. Man, that's like that's like, I don't know, House Lannister or Stark right there. Or, I don't know. Yeah. You guys want me to? Yeah. Alright. You guys are on my radar if something happens. Hopefully everybody, no, I'm saying hopefully everybody is assigned to a group, otherwise.
Okay, we can keep one brother up.
No, that's
We're gonna keep one brother.
Here's the downside. The expectations are a lot more for This now,
We
yeah.
can keep one brother.
Okay, we'll see. Alright, so this is good. You guys are?
So, me, Gabriel, and Chris.
3? Okay. 4, okay. Cody. You guys are good here?
That's pretty much what's happening.
So it's Cody, Michael, and Nasir. Is there, somebody is streaming? I don't know if, I think Gabriel is streaming, possibly.
Yeah, Gabriel was.
Okay. So anybody who's streaming, please make sure they're in the group. Looks like I don't have to intervene and do anything. So I am so happy and proud of you guys. You guys settled this on your own. Okay. Yes. So what is Sergio's? Okay, so 4. Are you guys okay? So put his name. Complete this. I think everybody is 4 now. Who's missing? Oh, Trent. Yeah, is Trent coming back? Is he? Anybody knows about Trent? Okay. Well, if Trent comes back, there's only one group that has one member remaining.
We're working on a downward dress.
Keep his brothers.
That's
true. You probably will have something else.
If there's any birthdays or like family events coming up, you guys can just order.
Yeah, you guys are the perfect team. You're all team Lannister.
Yeah.
All right, so
They are back.
just guys, one more minute. So this is all I have. The last part, the homework. There's a homework due on January 5th. You still have time. Look at the homework. It's already uploaded. This is a Saturday, I presume. And then Carson will be here Saturday. Then I'll see you guys. Actually, there's no class for like 2 weeks now. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. You guys are traveling. Be safe. I'll see you on January 2nd, on Thursday. Okay. Again, end of the class, submit this, and then optional, you guys want to do the homework, it's fine, or you can leave. I don't have anything else for now. All right? Huh? No, the homework is not optional. No. What? No, that's not what I said. I said I have a recording over here. So you can... What was that? Stop the stream.
I'm putting it away. I'm not waiting. I don't want to. Asking for that.
Alright, I'm going to go ahead and stop the streaming.
But we have no clue. We like our game.
Hey, want to like control the Mars rover?